that he made in 1857. Words were his decoration, you might say, on a jar. One of my favorites is written on one like the one beside it here. It's in 1840. That said, Dave belongs to Mr. Miles, for the oven bakes and the pot biles. To me, I've referred to Dave as the first rapper. Now, this jar right here, I just put the handles on. And this is just the stage that Dave would then sit and actually inscribe on it here. And if you'd like to, you can come over here and do a little ditty yourself right here. Dave made thousands of pots here. What he writes are things that are about his life. They're things that are about the pieces of pottery themselves. He had these little words, they had a rhythm to them. One of my favorites said, horses, mules, and hogs, all our cows is in the bogs, and there they shall ever stay till the buzzards take them away.
I guess he created a value in what he was doing, what he was making as far as the pottery is concerned, that he wasn't punished for it like any other slave would be. Maybe more value in having good pots, so they let him slide.
Well, you made a good indelible mark on that. I call doing this turning mud into money here.
Mud into money?
Yeah, that's what we do here.
Now it's worth $500,000.
Spending this time with my family in Edgefield has definitely schooled me on the difficulties that my people faced here. History can be ugly, but I'm willing to look at every angle to get the best possible picture. I'm heading to Oakley Park, a museum devoted to the legacy of the Confederacy, which isn't really my world.
If anyone of color would have an issue with the Confederate flag, my suggestion is that they would go back and research the history of their ancestors. True, there was slavery, however, that is part of the history of these United States. And there were many, many blacks who were active soldiers in the Confederate Army. They fought right along beside their white comrades. Hello, come in, come in. Would you like to have a tour of this beautiful home?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, come on, we'll start right with General Martin Witherspoon Gary. He was the third owner of the house. Very, very prominent, outspoken gentleman in this community. After the war, he got many of the gentlemen together to continue working to benefit the state of South Carolina, and he was instrumental in forming what they would call the Red Shirts.
So the Red Shirts, they were like before the Ku Klux Klan?
Yes, they were. The Red Shirts came into being after the war. The freed slaves, they continued to pillage and steal and burn all the animals from the plantations. So the more prominent men in the communities, they started forming the Red Shirts.
Yeah. Was every black person reacting with this kind of aggression? I doubt it.
This is the Confederate battle flag, and this is the one that so much controversy is about.
Confederate flag has a racial tone to it. The period that this flag was carried, it was a lot of racism going on, and that might be why.
People do not really understand what went on in that period of time. Black citizens of this country really needs to study the history, because it's just as much the black ancestry as it is the white ancestry.
She's offering her truth, what she's accepted as the truth based on information given to her. But I don't agree with it.
A lot of the slaves who were brought over here on the ships, they were captured in Africa or Mongolia or wherever they came from.
Mongolian slaves? Like, I never heard of that before.
You haven't?
No.
You need to study the history from about 1780 to about 1810.
What race were Mongolian slaves?
Well, they were all black.
Okay.
All black.
Like, are there different facial features or anything that you would...
Not distinctly that you would be able to say, well, he's Mongolian and he's African.
Right.
Not anything distinctive.
Oh, that's news to me.
It is. Okay, well, we have to study our ancestry.
I need to study my history? Mongolian slaves in South Carolina?
I just wonder what life was like on these grounds for African American or black in that time.
Well, servants were considered servants. and they were not allowed in the house except to do their jobs or do the menial labor that was required of them. But none of them were mistreated. They were provided with a home.
How do you know the slaves weren't mistreated on this property?
Just the documentation that we have, plus the fact that we have a lady that lives here in town that lived here.
Well, this woman wasn't old enough to be a slave.
No, she was not a slave, but she was a descendant of the slaves who had been here on this property.
I just don't believe that the slaves were treated well. I believe slaves were treated like slaves in that time period.
My ancestors are from this area, and they were slaves in an actual time period, so...
Everything is not as cut and dried as you would read in the newspaper, where you're black and I'm white and you never ever can even touch each other, anything like that. That's not the way it is anymore. So, you know, we're all God's children.
Right.
So...
It seems like people see history the way they'd like to see it and tell it the way they'd like to tell it. And I think as the information is passed, people kind of change it and they make it what they want it to be. But I want to get to the truth for the history of my family.
This is Whitfield Brooks' actual will. I give and bequeath the following slaves to Ellen Brooks, his daughter. The names are Adrienne and her 4 children, Charlotte, Josephine, Jane, and Georgiana.
Wow, this is getting far now, because Adrienne is...
Adrienne is your great-great-great-grandmother.
Here in South Carolina, I've learned a lot about what life was like for African Americans in the slave days. Aunt Gladys and I are going to the Archival Society to see if we can confirm that my great-great-great-grandmother, Jane Jenkins, was owned by the Donovan family.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
This is the Edgefield County Archives, and so we have lots and lots of records here. And because Edgefield County was such an agricultural area, we were one of the largest slaveholding areas in the state of South Carolina, too. So we have a lot of slave records. And I had heard from Tanya that you were coming, so I figured I'd pull some documents and see what we can do about finding some of your relatives. My name is Tricia Price Glenn, and I am the archivist for Edgefield County, South Carolina. We are fortunate to have many records in this facility, including coroner's reports. These are particularly fascinating because they tell a side of a slave life that is not often found anywhere else. We have an incredible number of documents that are called inventories. We can get the lists of the slaves they owned and how much they cost, and what they were appraised for, what they were sold for. R.G.M. Donovan, who was a general when the Civil War started, he was one of our large slaveholders. In the 1870 census, apparently Jane, your great-great-great-grandmother, she was living as a servant at the Donovan home. If she was living at the Donovan home, and 5 years before that is when freedom came for the slaves, she may well have been there during slavery. R.G.M. Donovan married Ellen Brooks, the daughter of Whitfield Brooks, a very influential man here in this community, and he was a slave owner. I decided to look at his will and his estate package to see if I could find a woman by the name of Jane. And I might have. I hope I have. I think, you know, this is Whitfield Brooks' actual will. It starts here. I give and bequeath the following 25 slaves to Ellen Brooks, his daughter. The names are George, Betsy, Moses, Phil, Clarissa, Charlotte, Adrienne, and her 4 children, Charlotte, Josephine, Jane, and Georgiana. I think I found her.
So that's wow, this is getting far now, because Adrienne is your
great-great-great-great-grandmother.
The fact that we can pinpoint a home where my great-great-great-grandmother, Jane Jenkins, and her mother, Adrienne, lived and worked as slaves for R.G.M. Donovan is incredible to me.
So really, you're fortunate because a lot of African Americans cannot go back beyond the 1870 census because it's difficult not knowing what their name is. The fact that this is here is pretty much proof that you've found your your 3 great-grandma.
I was trying to figure out more about Will. And from his mama to his mother's mother.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
There were a lot of aspects of slavery that were brutal. And I'd like Gloria, Gloria? Gloria has been researching here. She's studying some of the more brutal side of slavery. The reason we're telling you both the good and the bad is people need to know.
Right.
So, would you like to take him through the vault and show him?
Yes, I will. Edgefield is rather famous for not being kind to their slaves. In fact, that's how I got here. My